Tinder promises more choice than any matchmaker in history. But more choice was supposed to make things easier. Instead, dating apps are one of the few technologies where users report the outcome getting harder, not easier, the more options they're given. Ancient matchmakers understood something about choice that Silicon Valley is only now rediscovering. Sometimes solving a problem means limiting it, not expanding it. Imagine choosing a spouse the way you choose a house. You get to see it once, for 10 minutes, and you're not allowed to bring an inspector. No second walkthrough, no background check, no way to know if the foundation is cracked or if the pipes are about to burst. You just have to decide and live with that decision for the rest of your life. That sounds absurd, but for most of human history, this is close to what choosing a life partner actually looked like. Strip away the romance, and marriage is really a matching problem. You're trying to find one compatible person out of a huge pool of strangers, with almost no reliable information about who they really are. This mattered enormously in the past. In most agrarian and early urban societies, marriage wasn't just a personal choice. It was an economic decision, a survival strategy, sometimes a political alliance. A wrong match could ruin a family's finances or its standing for a generation. Historian Stephanie Kuntz, in her research on the history of marriage, shows just how high those stakes really were. The problem hasn't disappeared today. It's arguably gotten harder. Cities replaced villages. Strangers replaced neighbors. The pool of potential partners exploded from a few dozen familiar faces to millions of anonymous profiles. And the core obstacle never changed. You can't directly see into someone's character. You can't verify their intentions. Meeting people costs time and energy. And getting it wrong still carries a real cost. So the question isn't really, how do people fall in love? It's this: when the stakes are high and the information is missing, how do you choose correctly? If you can't inspect the house yourself, the next best option is to find someone you trust to inspect it for you. That's exactly the solution many ancient and traditional societies arrived at, long before anyone called it a system. They called it matchmaking. Across very different cultures, a strikingly similar institution appears. In Jewish communities across medieval and early modern Europe, this figure was known as the Shadchan. In many Indian communities, a similar role was filled by the Ghataka. Different names, different regions, different centuries, but the same underlying job. The matchmaker's function wasn't to create love. It was to solve a trust problem. Families couldn't easily verify a stranger's character, health, financial standing, or reputation on their own. So the matchmaker did it for them. She acted as a kind of human information network, gathering details that were scattered across a community and difficult for any single family to access alone. This worked because of how the matchmaker was embedded in the community. She wasn't an outsider. She lived among the same families, year after year, match after match. That created a powerful incentive structure. If she arranged a bad match, her reputation took the hit. Future families would hesitate to trust her. Her livelihood depended on getting it right, or at least right enough, often enough. In small, tightly connected communities, this kind of long-term accountability was hard to escape. The actual decision-making process blended hard facts with human judgment. Hard criteria came first, things like caste, class, religion, financial compatibility, and family standing. These were relatively easy to check and verify. But layered on top of that was something harder to quantify: the matchmaker's personal read on whether two people might actually get along. This wasn't romantic intuition in the modern sense. It was closer to informed pattern recognition, built from years of watching which pairings tended to work and which didn't. In this system, marriage compatibility was never really a mystery to be solved by the two people involved. It was a problem to be managed by someone with more information, more experience, and more at stake in getting it right. So the ancient solution to an information problem wasn't better technology. It was better trust. A dedicated, accountable human filter, standing between two people who barely knew each other, and a decision that would define both of their lives. Now fast forward a few centuries. Remove the matchmaker. Remove the village. Remove the shared community entirely. The problem doesn't go away. It just changes shape. And the new trusted intermediary isn't a person anymore. It's code. If an algorithm is the new matchmaker, the obvious question is, what is it actually optimizing for? Dating apps like Tinder replaced the human matchmaker with something built for a completely different scale of problem. Instead of a handful of families in one town, the pool is now millions of strangers spread across an entire city or an entire country. No human matchmaker could ever process that volume of people. An algorithm can. The basic mechanism works through swiping and matching. Users express interest or disinterest in profiles, and the system only creates a connection when both people opt in. Behind that simple action sits a recommendation system, built to predict who a user might be interested in based on their behavior, their stated preferences, and patterns drawn from enormous amounts of user data. In function, this plays a similar role to the matchmaker's memory and community knowledge. It's an information aggregator, filtering a huge pool of strangers down to a smaller set of plausible matches. But the incentive structure underneath this system looks very different from the matchmakers. Dating apps operate as businesses, and their revenue depends heavily on engagement and retention, meaning how much time people spend using the app. This creates a structural tension. The matchmaker succeeded when a marriage succeeded. She had no reason to keep introducing the same couple to other options once a good match was made. A dating app's business model doesn't automatically reward taking a user off the platform for good. Researchers studying dating app usage, including work published by Pew Research Center, have documented how mixed user experiences with these platforms can be, and how usage patterns don't always align neatly with the stated goal of finding a lasting relationship. The decision-making process has shifted too. Where the matchmaker relied on personal judgment built from lived experience in a community, the algorithm relies on statistical pattern matching across huge datasets. It doesn't know a person's character the way a matchmaker might claim to. It knows behavioral signals, what kind of profile someone tends to swipe on, how they engage with the app, what they've stated as preferences. This is a fundamentally different kind of knowledge. It trades depth for breadth. The matchmaker knew a few dozen people deeply. The algorithm knows almost nothing about any single person, but it can process millions of them at once. This is the real achievement of the modern solution. It solved a problem the matchmaker never had to face: scale. A matchmaker operating in a village of a few hundred people didn't need to filter through millions of strangers. The algorithm was built specifically for a world where the dating pool became too large for any one person to manage. But in solving the scale problem, the algorithm may have reopened the very problem the matchmaker was originally built to close: trust. When matching is handled by community reputation, accountability is direct and personal. When matching is handled by a system optimized primarily for engagement, that accountability becomes far less clear. Two systems, same core function, filtering a large pool of strangers down to plausible partners, but built on very different incentives. So what happens when you actually put them side by side? Strip both systems down to their basic components, and something interesting happens. The matchmaker and the algorithm turn out to be built from the same four parts. Both rely on an information source. For the matchmaker, that was community reputation, gossip, family history, financial standing, things people in a small town simply knew about each other over time. For the algorithm, it's behavioral data, swipes, stated preferences, engagement patterns, things a platform collects automatically at massive scale. Both use a filtering mechanism to narrow down the pool. The matchmaker filtered through personal judgment, built from years of watching which pairings tended to succeed. The algorithm filters through statistical pattern matching, built from processing enormous datasets no single human could hold in their head. Both operate within an accountability structure, though a very different one. The matchmaker was accountable through reputation. A bad match cost her future business in a small, interconnected community. The platform is accountable primarily through engagement metrics, tied to a business model built on user retention rather than relationship outcomes. And both operate within a search scope. The matchmaker worked within a small, known local pool, often just a few dozen or a few hundred candidates. The algorithm works within a massive, largely anonymous pool that can span an entire country. For categories, two completely different toolkits. Same underlying architecture. That gives us the key similarities. Neither system actually creates compatibility. Both are filters, narrowing a large group of strangers down to a smaller set of plausible candidates. Neither can see directly into someone's true character, so both rely on proxy signals instead. The matchmaker used family reputation as a stand-in for character. The app uses photos, bios, and behavior as a stand-in for it. And in both cases, the person searching for a partner has to place some degree of trust in the intermediary doing the filtering, whether that intermediary is a woman in their community or a piece of software. But the differences matter just as much, and they aren't small. The most significant is incentive alignment. The matchmaker succeeded when the marriage succeeded. A dating app, as a business, generates revenue mainly through continued engagement, not necessarily through users leaving to start a lasting relationship. This is a documented tension raised by researchers studying dating app behavior, not simply a cynical assumption. It doesn't mean apps never produce lasting relationships. Clearly, many do. But the underlying incentive structure isn't automatically pointed toward that outcome the way the matchmaker's was. There's also a difference in accountability and feedback. The matchmaker operated inside a small, closed community where outcomes were visible and personal. If a marriage she arranged fell apart, everyone knew. The algorithm operates at a scale where individual outcomes are statistically invisible. No single match succeeding or failing meaningfully affects the system. And there's a genuine trade-off between depth and breadth. The matchmaker offered deep but narrow vetting. Few candidates, but each one understood in real social context. The algorithm offers broad but shallow vetting. Countless candidates, but minimal context on any one of them. These differences point towards something bigger than dating. As the size of a candidate pool grows, humans consistently reach for some form of delegated trust. We outsource judgment to an intermediary, whether that intermediary is a person or a system, because unaided individual search simply doesn't scale. This pattern shows up far beyond marriage. It shows up in job markets, in real estate, even in scientific peer review, wherever the pool of options becomes too large for one person to evaluate alone. Which brings us to the deeper lesson sitting underneath this entire comparison. The tools keep changing. Reputation-based human networks gave way to algorithms, and something else will eventually follow. But the underlying need hasn't moved. When the stakes are high and the information is incomplete, people don't actually search for more choices. They search for better filtering. That challenges a basic assumption behind the modern dating app pitch, that more options automatically means a better outcome. The historical record suggests something closer to the opposite. What actually solved this problem, for thousands of years, wasn't abundance. It was trust, structure, and constraint. So maybe the real question isn't whether Tinder is better or worse than a matchmaker. It's whether you trust a person more than an algorithm to filter your next relationship. Which one do you think actually knows you better, and why? Let me know in the comments.